It took 2 votes and 3 Democrats, but no deal, says the governor, and the tax bill goes to the House. But with the transportation program still in flux, is a supermajority still super? We'll talk with 2 high-profile Democrats about those and other issues, and we'll update Arkansas's efforts to move medical marijuana from the shadows to the storefront. Arkansas Week, coming up.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Arkansas Week. A Republican governor with Republican majorities in both chambers, a supermajority, as it were, in one chamber, and suddenly some pushback. Taxes and transportation. That's where we begin tonight. We're joined by Representative Deborah Ferguson, Democrat of West Memphis, and Representative Dan Douglas, Republican of Bentonville. Madam, sir, thanks very much for being with us. Mr. Douglas, I want to go to you because you have been for what's called the highway lobby, sort of the go-to guy. We don't know much about what is going to happen Monday, except the governor indicates that he will unveil his plan for a highway program on Monday. Why don't we have, well, first of all, what are you looking for? Can you give us any insight on that?
Well, from the governor's past comments and past conversations that he's had, the governor is wanting to refer something out to the voters, to the citizens of the state of Arkansas to fund our highway system. In all probability, an extension of the half-cent sales tax or renewal of the half-cent sales tax, possibly some fuel tax increases, and possibly some registration fee increases. You know, Steve, we've kicked the can down the road, so to speak, too long on highway funding and not addressed it. The price tag's gotten so big that it's very problematic. And there's a feeling in the legislature right now that we're being asked to cut taxes on the upper income brackets and then refer a tax out to increase gas, increase registration fees, extend sales tax. That doesn't set too well with a lot of the legislators up there.
Well, evidently it doesn't set very well with you. Is the gentleman from Bentonville satisfied at all with what the administration, as you indicate, is likely to propose? How much money are we talking about
You know, we look at it 2 ways on the highway funding. We've got what we need for new construction and congestion relief, and that's what the half-cent sales tax currently has been working on. But then we've got the maintenance end of it, and that's what we need for the rest of the state to maintain the roads we've already got. And for that, we're looking about $240 million. So 480 altogether is what all the studies have showed we need to maintain and for congestion relief and new construction. And that's an awfully big price tag. And myself personally, I don't feel like we can shoulder all that ask on the motorist of the state of Arkansas.
So you would turn to?
There's
only one place to go.
Only one other place to go, Steve, and that is to revenue transfer. See, Arkansas is one of the few states around that we rely mainly on fuel tax to fund our highway system. Other states take road use items such as sales tax on new and used cars and road use items, tires, batteries, etc., and blend that into their highway maintenance and funding equation. Arkansas doesn't. We're just relying basically on sales tax. Or fuel tax, excuse me.
Excellent, right. Ms. Ferguson.
Yeah, I agree with Dan. I think we have to look at numerous sources when we're looking at funding highways. We can't let our gas tax get so out of line. I think we have to look at some general revenue taxes that go to automotive parts and those kind of things. I know Dan has a bill to look at those kind of things. I would also like to see us look at a toll road. I drive from West Memphis to Little Rock all the time. It would be great if we could have a third lane that's a toll lane. We have to look at a lot of different sources. I don't think we can do it just with gas tax.
Mr. Hutchinson, and he's not alone in this, has said he would very much, in fact, he's opposed to nibbling away anymore at general revenue. Where does that leave the equation now? We have a contest of ideas here, concepts.
Well, I think it is important for us to delay looking at his $96 million tax relief until we've looked at the essential.
There's our segue, by the way, but go ahead.
Until we've looked at funding essential programs. I don't want us to get into a situation like Oklahoma and Kansas where we've completely depleted all our revenues at the expense of tax relief. Certainly I'm for tax relief, but I think we have to look at our needs first. I mean, we have education, preschool, seniors, there are all kinds of needs that need to be addressed, and we need to make sure those are met before we vote on a tax reduction.
Well, you have 76 members in your caucus, your conference, Mr. Douglas, and a good many of them have indicated that they're just going to hold the administration hostage. Are you holding the tax bill hostage, basically?
I don't want to say we're going to hold anybody hostage, Steve, but we need to negotiate and come up with a solution for funding some of our needs. You know, we're looking at a $97 million tax cut in revenue. We're looking at teacher pay increases, which is going to take about $60 million. We're looking at highway funding, how much, and from what source are we going to get that? And there's numerous others, senior care. There's a lot of issues out here that we haven't talked about how we're going to fund them or where we're going to cut expense in state government. That's the other, where are we going to cut spending to make up for these other funding needs or these tax cuts?
Well, the administration is saying that we've got natural revenue growth and that the administration's comfortable with that. Are you, Ms. Ferguson?
We're tracking, Dan and I looked at that, we're tracking pretty close to projections. The last couple of months have been below projection, but even at that, the increase over projection was $64 million, and we're talking about cutting taxes almost $100 million. And that arithmetic doesn't really add up if you look at the amount of tax reduction you're looking at. It's pretty basic. If you can't, I mean, I'm not going to take my family to Disney World on a vacation if I can't pay the utility bill.
Would the administration, do you have any idea whether the administration would accept less than that basically $100 million that's in the tax bill that just came out of the Senate?
I think that's his basic ask. Whether he'd accept less or not, it depends on whether he could get this through the legislature or not. If we come to a stalemate, he might have to settle for less. We might have to settle a little less on highways, but that's all open for discussion and negotiation, I would think, at this time.
Yep.
That supermajority vote is always a high bar. I mean, you're trying to, we've looked at it with Medicaid expansion and all kinds of things. When you're trying to get 75 votes out of 100, that's a really high bar. In terms of highways, I think we ought to come down here and do our job and vote for what needs to be done for highways and not refer it to the people. But I understand, I'm a pragmatist. If it takes referring it to the people to get highway funding, then that's what we ought to do.
Well, that's been almost a given, or assumed to be a given from the get-go, as it were. So that's not kicking it down the can necessarily, is it?
Well,
given the electorate's history of generally going along with tax increases.
Yeah, well, you know,
at a referendum.
Yeah, you look back. The last one we did was the half-cent sales tax to expand current roads, which is set to expire in 2023. That was referred out. The voters overwhelmingly approved that. They showed they wanted highways. But on this one, there is a good flavor in the legislature right now to do something right now, because you referred out you're still a couple years before you get it passed, and then a year before it starts being collected. And so we're still, our highways are degrading. We still have potholes. We still have people running tires, you know, tearing their cars up, and we need to take action because we've delayed too long.
This is barely adequate, Mr. Douglas, if I'm hearing you correctly, in your estimation.
Yeah.
If it's even barely adequate.
Yeah, yeah. An overlay program. The first thing we have to do is maintain the roads we have. An overlay program for the state takes around $200 million, $220 million, and that is just to overlay and maintain the roads we currently have. That's not any expansion. That's not any new roads, but just to maintain what we have. That's the first priority there. And then we've got to look at possibly the half-cent sales tax or other funding options that could be referred to the voters later. Probably a two-prong attack: maintenance, and then a referral for expansion of the system and expansion of congestion relief.
In your conference, Ms. Ferguson, there is quite a bit of talk about turning to the EITC.
Right.
There doesn't seem to be a great deal of enthusiasm on the other side of the aisle.
Well, I would certainly like to see a larger part of any tax reduction going to working families. And I think mirroring the state earned income tax credit on the federal would be a great way to do that. I think we looked at 5% would be about $40 million. And if you look at the governor's plan, if you took out the people and didn't have the rate reduction making above $500,000, that reduces it by $73 million, which would free up some money for working family reduction and for other needs.
Mr. Douglas talks about, in the future or even in this session, holding down general revenue spending. Any proposals?
Oh, you know, the governor's had a policy from day one in office of a hiring freeze and attrition and reducing the state employment rolls.
But there's not much money there, is there?
We've reduced about 2,500 employees, I think, over his previous 4 years here. In the grand scheme of things, whenever you see salaries increase on some others, we really haven't saved much money there. We need to look at getting serious about what services we need to provide or should be providing. Are there agencies out there that were created that maybe don't fulfill all the needs that, or other priorities should take precedence over them? And I think there's some room to trim some fat. Now, his transformation, we'll see what comes up there. We haven't seen all of it yet.
Well, there's one program in particular, Ms. Ferguson, that appears on its way to being eliminated with your support, and that's the marketing program.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh yes, absolutely. No, I don't think it will be eliminated. We're talking about the health insurance marketplace. We're going to hopefully move that back under the insurance department.
Well, that's what
Yeah, so it will be more efficient, and they will continue to have a very strong call outreach center, and do some necessary marketing. A lot of that marketing is already done through Blue Cross and the insurers themselves because it's to their advantage to have those premiums. So I think the whole marketplace has changed dramatically since we implemented the private option. I feel very comfortable with moving the marketplace back to the insurance department. I think that'll be a positive thing.
Ms. Ferguson, Mr. Douglas, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being with us.
You bet. Thank you.
Our roundtable in a moment. Back now with three colleagues: Andrew DeMillo, Bureau Chief at the Capitol for the Associated Press; Michael Hiblin, News Director at KUAR Public Radio in Central Arkansas; Wesley Brown, reporter and editor for Talk Business and Politics. Out of the Senate and into the House, took 2 votes on the south side of the Capitol, and now it looks like a stalemate for the near term anyway, Andrew, on the House side, on the South side.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It got out of the Senate with, for lack of a better term, a little bit of a speed bump, and it seems like the common theme that we saw on some of the initial holdouts in the Senate is what's going to be hanging up the tax cut bill in the House potentially, and that's highways. We're hearing some growing frustration among some Republican lawmakers about the inaction on highway funding. As you remember, the governor, legislative leaders at the beginning of the session had said highway funding was a priority. We're 4 weeks, almost 5 weeks into the session. We haven't seen a plan emerge or really any consensus at this point. So it's becoming clear that these two issues that we expected to be kind of the two big issues of the session are really intertwined. And I think next week we're going to figure out how intertwined they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we first started, I asked one of the lawmakers, Dan Douglas, who just came on, was there going to be any horse trading on these big issues, tax cuts, and the response was, we don't think so. But now you're starting to see that emerge. Now, you're starting to see as Andrew said, they're not just closely tied together; they are tied together. Over in the Senate. The discussion when we talked to the senators about there was first the 25-5 vote and then the 28-5 vote. The issue, of course, everyone, even when you talk to them directly and indirectly, was highways. We have to do something about highways, and the consensus is not that we've referred to the people as the governor is one to do. So.
Yeah, and this is expected to be an even tougher fight in the House. You have Democrats who hold 24 seats. At least 21 of those are said to be planning to vote against it at this point. And you have a lot of Republicans, obviously, who are also very concerned about this. So getting the supermajority needed in the House is going to be a long shot unless you appease a lot of people with the highway plan. The governor, as was mentioned, is going to announce some kind of highway plan on Monday, and we'll see if that satisfies people. The next step here for the tax cut proposal is expected to go to a House committee on Tuesday. So the timing there seems very deliberate to try to appease people because they want to know something about highways and where money is going to be coming from.
Well, Chairman Jett of House Rev and Tax, like other members of the Republicans, describes it as a heavy lift. Well, I get varying estimates in the Republican conference of as few as 12 or 14 or as many as 20 or 24 members of the Republican conference are a no vote at this particular moment unless we can see they can see something on a highway program. So the Republicans have a supermajority in the House, but as many as 40%, you add to the Democrats, that's 40% or thereabouts of the House members that are no on a bill that requires a 3/4 vote.
I think maybe the success is what you did in the House. You may have to, when you finally get that final vote and you have maybe half of those Republicans, then you maybe have to flip some of the Democrats with some offers on earned income tax credit or something like that. But I think the success of this is you're going to have to see some Democrats come to the other side, just as you did in the Senate. And either way, either approach is going to be pretty tough.
What can he offer them? How much muscle can the House Democrat? There's a great deal of sentiment for earned income tax credit, EITC, in the Democratic caucus. Feasible? A meld, a blend?
What you're hearing from Democrats, you hear desire for earned income tax credit. You also hear, at least in the Senate end, you heard desire for at least finding additional funding for other needs that they say are being underfunded. Pre-kindergarten is one of those things we hear a lot about.
Medical and
other programs. So it may not be just earned income tax credit. It may be trying to find additional funding from Democrats who are saying, I'm for tax cuts, I'm for tax credits, but what about these other needs? Right. And so that may also be part of the equation on this as well too.
Yeah, and the fear is that with the less revenue coming in because of the tax cuts, these agencies that are already tight may see cuts to their budgets. Education, one pre-K, there are a lot of concerns that this is just going to impact so many other programs negatively if this can't be done in a way that appeases them. And highways, obviously, the governor had said 4 weeks ago that he didn't expect he would have a proposal that would meet, the 400,000 or so that the highway department says it needs to maintain things. Millions, thank you. Millions needed. But they're going to have to find a way to fund highways, and I don't know if it's going to be the traditional ways, fuel taxes, whether or not there will have to be more than just what's out there right now.
Well, for the last few years, anyway, we've been using some general revenue toward highways. Do you sense a certain inevitability? Mr. Hutchinson has said, I don't want any more out of general revenue. But one gets a feeling almost of inevitability that we're nibbling more and more. We're going to have to at general revenue to get where the highway people want to go.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how you get over not just the resistance from the governor, but also from Democrats over going much further on tapping into general revenue. And that's the thing. We talked about this with highways. The dynamics haven't really changed. You've got two paths that are still very, very difficult, and you face significant opposition to either one of them. So I still don't know how you get past the resistance to tapping into general revenue, or how you get past the anti-tax sentiment that you have a lot of Republicans have, or how you combine those in a way that would be palatable to everyone.
And I think there was sentiment over the last few years that as the economy grows, that you're going to starting to see more tax collections come into budget coffers, thus the revenues rise, even to the point of the remote internet sales. Or, in the last session we were talking about there were some estimates. Yeah, we were going to get this bonanza I heard some as high as 300 million that was going to come in on internet tax sales, and we haven't seen that. And so, as Andrew said, this you keep chipping off of general revenues, and now I think there's kind of a firewall there. We can't do that anymore.
Okay, on to the social agenda, which we have, or social policy agenda, which we really haven't touched on in previous editions, but there was action on in the Senate, so-called trigger bill on abortion, which puts, assuming the House acts, it would put Arkansas among probably at least half dozen states that have enacted similar measures.
Yeah, that's correct. The Senate passed legislation that says if U.S. Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, or if the U.S. Constitution is amended to allow states to prohibit abortion, it would automatically ban abortion in Arkansas with a medical emergency exception. You've got 4 other states that have similar so-called trigger laws in effect. Went through the Senate with unanimous Republican support and picked up a few Democrats as well. Given the makeup of the House, I don't see it facing much resistance there. And Arkansas already has some of the strictest abortion laws, but we're still going to see even more measures like this coming up. There's the legislation dealing with abortion ban in the case of Down syndrome diagnosis, and more restrictions on abortion facilities. So this is kind of this is the beginning of what we're going to see throughout the session.
And an interesting twist, though, Thursday night, the Supreme Court in a late decision in a Louisiana case that seemed to closely, if not identically, mirror, Michael, an Arkansas statute.
Yeah, this was seen as almost a test case, maybe for the current makeup of the court, to see their tone or feeling, mood toward abortion. And basically this stopped enforcement of a law that would require abortion doctors to have admitting privileges in a hospital. And yes, Arkansas passed a similar law a few years ago, but this, I think a lot of people just wanted to see the mood, and you saw Chief Justice Roberts going with the 4 liberal judges here, and that just seems to suggest the mood is not changing drastically right now with the new lineup.
And it wasn't even the last word from the Supreme Court on that case.
Yeah, and if you got on social media about this case, the rumblings is that even from the conservatives is Chief Justice is going to start siding with with the liberals on this particular crucial issue for the Republicans. And as Michael said, this is a test case. If he continues to do that, it's going to be pretty interesting to see how that particular issue goes forward.
You and Michael were on marijuana this past week, so to speak.
Yeah.
Anyway, the state took, we keep moving toward.
Well, they finally finalized the licenses for 32 dispensaries in the state, and the talk now is that we could actually have product available for people with the qualifying conditions by April. This has been more than 2 years since the residents, voters of Arkansas, approved medical marijuana. A lot of people said the state had been dragging its feet, but this really now puts it close to full implementation.
Yeah, and I've talked to some of the dispensary owners. They're looking at early April to have product on the shelf, cannabis products, and the rest of them, all 32 of them, by mid to late summer. So by mid to late summer, we'll have a full-fledged industry of medical marijuana for the first time in the state's history. So
Yeah, and the gentleman who has been instrumental in bringing these statutes somewhat unwillingly on his part, Mr. House, it looks like we may have legislation going to the electorate again, a proposed amendment in terms of the illnesses that would be covered.
Yeah, he's got a bill out there to expand the number from 18 qualifying conditions to 57, but that bill has sat in committee for a couple of weeks now, so I don't know if it'll even come out because there's a lot of people opposed to that in the industry.
Got to wrap it up there because we're out of time. Guys, thanks to you for coming in. As always, thanks to you for watching, and we'll see you next week. Yeah, I haven't.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.